In this video, we're going to be taking a look at using InkScape and the InkStitch extension for InkScape to create a patch embroidery file. Now, both applications are free to download, but there is a little bit of a learning curve to learning InkScape and then, of course, learning how InkStitch will convert our vector graphic into an embroidery file. So hopefully this will help you learn a little bit about Inkscape and how to use Inkscape to firstly create vector artwork and then some of the nuances of InkStitch and how to convert that into an embroidery file. But before we actually get into taking a look at this artwork that we're going to be making into a patch, I thought it would be helpful if we learn just a little bit about how Inkscape works with nodes. Because we are going to have to do some node editing in this design coming up. So first of all, let's grab our pen tool and take a look at our node situation here. And we're going to click here and we're going to click down here and then right click, and that will create a line for us. And if we double click on that line, you will see these nodes appear. Now, one thing I should point out, if I go up here to the view menu and choose display mode, I'm in the wireframe or outline mode. So that's why we just see the line. If I was coming over here to the normal side, we don't see anything because we don't have a stroke applied. But if I did add a stroke, now you would see that stroke. Okay, but we're going to be working right now in display mode outline, or I call it wireframe sometimes. So if I double click, so our node, first of all, our node tool is right here, and our keyboard shortcut for our node tool is N. But if I double click right here, it's just going to create a node. And if we look at this node, you'll see that it's being represented by this little icon. And that icon looks just the same as this one and just the same as this one. Okay, so that essentially tells me that this is going to behave just like this one and this one does. If I move this one, notice what happens. Okay, if I move this one, it moves in a similar fashion, doesn't it? Okay, so this is a corner node, and you'll see that there's some options up here. And the first one, it says make selected nodes corner. Okay, so that's already a corner node because it creates a corner if we were to move it. Now the next one, if I click on that one, it says make selected node smooth. And when I click on that, you notice that this icon changes. Now you'll also notice that we've got these control handles on either side. And if you don't see those, you may have accidentally turned them off over here. So we want show transformation handles for selected nodes, and then we also want to show Bezier handles of selected nodes. Okay, so you can see here that we do have our control handles on, and then if I were to move that, you could see how now that node acts differently than when it was a corner node. Okay, so you notice now how that's acting differently again. But if I click on that again and move it, now you can see how it acts differently. It's a little bit strange because sometimes we'll say, hey, make that a corner node, and you saw it didn't actually make it a corner node. It was still a curve. So just kind of some quirks you just got to be mindful of. Now the next option up here, it says make selected nodes symmetrical. Okay, and again, you'll see that icon change. And when I change one handle, the other handle changes with it. Okay. And then our last option here is to make selected nodes auto smooth. Now you'll notice that that icon is now a circle, and you'll see that it looks different. Okay, because it's the auto smooth option. Now if I go back to corner, notice that I still have these control handles. So I chose to make it corner, but if those control handles are still visible, you see, now it's only controlling one side of the curve. It's not controlling both sides like these other options. Where we hit smooth, it changes both sides. We make symmetrical, it changes both sides. And we make auto smooth, it changes both sides. But if I put it back to corner, now you can see it only changes the one side. Okay? So just kind of keep those little points in mind as we get into our graphic. So we're going to go to the View menu and choose Normal. And we're going to hit File and Import and take a look at what we're going to create for a patch. So this is the logo that we're going to use for our patch. And we'll go ahead and accept the defaults here. So this is the logo. I believe this is some type of anime logo. So we're going to create a patch of this. Now, the white area in this design is going to be our satin border. The red area is going to be our patch fabric, and this little black outline we're not going to use. Okay. Now, if we had the original vector artwork, that would save us a few steps, because then we could go straight into creating our embroidery file. But in this case, we don't have any vector information or path information, and we need path information. So let's come over here to Trace Bitmap, and InkScape has a pretty decent image converter built into it. There are also various online image converters too, but this one does a pretty good job. We're using the brightness cutoff option, and you see this threshold option. All we're going to do is move our threshold till we see what it is we want to see. In this case, we see our graphic in its entirety now. The reason the black outline shows first, it's because it's the darkest color of our design, clearly. And then the next color is the red. So as we increase the threshold, now we see the red. And usually what I do is I go till I see, what I want to create path information for, and then I go a little bit farther. If we went all the way to the end, you would see it just black it out. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, I can hit apply, and you can see what we've created now. And you look down here in our info box, it says that we've created 136 nodes along this path. Okay, now we still have just a single path and our image. Okay, so I could just turn off the visibility of our image because we don't even need to see that. So that's all we have at this point. It's just this singular path. But I need to get rid of this black outline. So to do this, I'm going to hit Path, and I'm going to choose Break Apart. Now I am going to go into the wireframe mode because I think it's going to be easier to see this. So that black outline, if I click that far outside one and hit delete, we've gotten rid of it. Now I have just this information. I have a path on the outside and a path on the inside. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate my interior path, Control D on my keyboard to duplicate that path, and then I'm going to select that duplicate, hold my Shift key down and select this outside one, and choose Path and Combine. Okay, now this one here, let's call it Patch Fabric, and then let's call this one Satin Border. Now I do like to create layers, so we're going to call this Satin Border Layer and click Add, and we're going to move our Satin Border object to the Satin Border layer, and this one here we're going to call it I'm going to call it Patch Applique. Okay, because that's kind of how we're going to be creating this patch, as an applique. Okay, so let's go back over to the View menu here, and let's look at normal mode so we can see what we're created here. So first of all, our patch fabric, we're going to make it just a red color just so we can kind of see it. And then the black is going to be our satin border. But our satin border is going to be in white, but to represent it, we're just going to kind of do that gray color. Okay, so now what I need to do, because we're going to create this as an applique, this red area, this red shape, needs to be inside of our satin border. And currently, it's not. So let's go back over to outline mode. I think we could see this a little bit better. So we're going to take our patch fabric, and we're going to add a dynamic offset, something that's called a dynamic offset. We're going to offset this so it's inside our satin border. Now, I do want you to pay attention to this little icon here. It kind of looks like what they call a bezier. Okay, it's just a little curve, and it's showing it as a bezier path. But watch what happens to that when we go up here to path and we choose dynamic offset. That now changes to this little circle, and that icon tells us that there is some type of effect applied to this. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to switch over to our node tool, and as soon as we do that, we've got this little node here that we can interact with. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'm going to pull this up just past center. So that's center roughly, right? Just past center, there you go. So now when we come over with our satin border, you can see it's going to cover up our patch, right? And that's exactly what we want, just slightly past center. So we can move this still. We're going to go slightly past center. That's what I like right there, slightly past center. Okay? But in order for that to take effect, we do need to go to path and watch this icon right here. We're going to choose object to path, and now you can see that icon now changes back to the way it was. Okay? And so now we have our patch fabric. You see that? Now, we do have a million nodes here, and we may not want that. Okay, so we may want to clean, especially right here. See that right there? We may definitely want to clean that up. So if we just go ahead and choose Path Simplify, you can see that now that has been cleaned up significantly. Now, when we use that simplify function, if you look at it closely, you can see right here at this corner was greatly simplified. So you can see that this corner was greatly simplified, and we may not want it to be simplified. Now, in other graphics applications, we can actually just select a few nodes, and we could just say, can you just simplify that portion of the design for me? And it wouldn't affect everything else. But there is a little bit of a workaround, and I just think it's helpful for us to know that if we're trying to do something and it's not acting just exactly the way we want it, there is a potential solution. So no, there isn't a reduce selected nodes function here, but let's just try something here. What if we were to delete, for example, let's say we deleted that node, and as we're deleting nodes, we say we delete that one, we just watch our path. So now we are manually deleting nodes, but you see the path itself really didn't change much at all. Okay, we're going to delete this node that is close to there. We're going to delete that node that's close to there. When you have two nodes at just a small distance on the curve, we know that we probably don't need that node. This one in the middle, yes, but you see all these? We don't need all those. Those are all sitting right on top of one another. Okay, so we don't really need those. So we could come in here and do this. Certainly we could come in here and do this manually. But if we do want to use that kind of simplify command, one crazy option that we could select this node and we could select this node right here. So let me zoom in here a little bit. Because yeah, we've got a node on top of a node right here. You see that? I didn't even see that till I really zoomed in, but we'll go ahead and delete that. But anyhow, if we select this node, okay, and then we come up here and select this one, and we choose this option right here, which break path at selected nodes, okay, and then now we can take this path. Now, even though we said break path at selected nodes, it hasn't actually broken that path at this point. It's still, see how it's still one? But if we now come up here to break apart, and now I click on just this path over here, now we just have that one path, and now if we choose path simplify, okay, now it just simplified the nodes that were on that path. We'll go ahead and delete that. Okay, so that is one way to handle that, and then we could just come in here, select both of those paths again, and choose path and combine. Okay, I mean, that's a little crazy to do all that, but you could do it. And then I selected those two nodes again, and then hit join selected nodes. And now that's all back to one path again. Okay? You don't have to do all that. You don't really have to simplify the path. I'm just saying if that's what you want to do, you could certainly do that. Okay? So now we have this path. So this newly created offset path, and now we're going to call this patch fabric again. Okay, patch fabric. All right, so there's our patch fabric. Okay, let's do patch fabric outline shape. And then we're going to create a duplicate of that. So we're going to hit Control D. Okay. And our duplicate then is going to be patch fabric tack down. Okay. So that is going to be our next thing. And we're going to, again, we're going to do the dynamic offset. So we're going to come up here to path and choose dynamic offset. And then we'll switch to our node tool. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come slightly inside this, like so. And I'm going to go roughly the middle, like so. Okay. And then again, we're going to come up here to path and choose object to path. And now this becomes our new tack down stitch. So imagine doing it this way when we're talking about applique. So if you know anything about applique or making patches, what we're going to do is we're going to run the embroidery file. So we're going to take our patch fabric and we're going to put it in our hoop. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this, the patch fabric outline shape. So it's just going to create a series of stitches that will be a guide for us to cut our fabric to this shape. Or if we really wanted to get fancy, what we could do is we could take that outline and export it as a SVG file, and we could cut our patch fabric on our laser. That's what I do. I have a laser, so I would just cut my patch fabric on my laser and it will cut it to this shape, which is kind of nice. Okay, so I might even make a video of that for you as well when we actually go to stitch this out so you could see this in action. But at any rate, if you don't have a laser, what we would do is we would just hoop our stabilizer and our patch fabric in a hoop. Probably just some tearaway is all you would need. And then run these stitches and then follow the stitches and just hand cut your patch to shape. And then we would go about making the patch. So what we would have to do is when we go to make our patch, what we would have to do is we would have to run this outline shape, and that becomes where we would place our newly created patch shape. We would place it. So we run this stitch, the outline shape, that shows us where to place it. And then we would run our tack down stitch. That's going to hold our fabric in place. And then we would do our satin border. Okay, so now comes the fun part. It's the satin border. Okay, this is what we all signed up for. So first things first, let's do this. Our image here, let's just go ahead and delete it because we don't need that anymore. We have to decide how big a patch we're going to make. So in my case, I want my patch to fit a 4x4 hoop. So we're going to come in here and we're going to switch to inches. And for our size, let's go back over here to display mode normal. So for our size, we're going to resize this. Go to our selection tool and come up here to inches. I want it to fit a 4x4 hoop, so I'm going to do 3.8. But I want to make sure that I have that lock icon selected. So we're going to do 3.8. That will fit my 4x4 hoop. Okay, there we go. And so now we can create our satin border. Now this is where it gets interesting. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my satin border object. And we're just going to go ahead and convert our satin border, but we cannot do this quote unquote automatically. We cannot convert our satin border automatically. A satin border for InkStitch requires 2 rails, okay? And what we have for our satin border is just a shape at this point. So we need 2 rails. Well, how do we go about doing this? Well, let's go ahead and create a new layer, and we'll call it, I don't know, we'll call it new satin border. Okay, we'll choose add, and then we will take our satin border layer, or satin border object, and move it to our new satin border layer, and let's just turn everything off. And let's just focus on our new satin border. So what we have to do is we have to think about how this is going to stitch out, okay? And this just comes with practice. Practice makes perfect, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start our border at the top here and just follow along here. So it's going to stitch, it's going to come down here, stitch, stitch, come down here, and then it's going to have a walking stitch, a manual stitch is going to come here to this end, and then it's going to start stitching from here, come along, boom, boom. Same thing, we're going to walk all the way up to the top here, start stitching here and come back down, boom, boom, boom. Okay, so that's going to be helpful for us to know exactly how our satin border, we want our satin border to stitch out. Okay, so that's first step. And I think I accidentally moved my outline, so I don't want to do that. So that's the first step, okay? And so now what we have to do is we have to make all of our rungs to do just that, okay? So to do that, I think the easiest way to accomplish this is probably going to be, let's see here. How do I want to handle this? I just got to think for a second. All right, I think I've got it. I think I know what I want to do here. So first of all, let's just double click on our path. And this is where understanding node editing is going to be pretty helpful to us. So what we're going to do is right here where these two connect, we're going to select that one, right? And we're going to select this one by holding our shift key. So we've selected those two, and we're going to choose this option. We're going to choose break selected nodes. I am going to go to the outline mode for this. I just think it'll be a little bit easier. Okay, so now you can see those two nodes have changed, right? They're different than all the others. Okay, so where does it connect again? Well, it connects down here. So let's go ahead and select that one and shift select this one. Okay, and let's do that. Let's break the nodes. Okay, again, you can see that those two have changed. And now we're going to come down, back around over here. We're going to select that node and shift select this node. And we're going to do the same thing right here. Break selected nodes. So now those are broken. And it's going to come back around, back over here. All right. Excellent so far. Excellent so far. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our path and we're going to choose path and we're going to choose this break apart option. Now this is the part where you don't want to panic, but this could be a little bit confusing. So you see here, we've got this path, right? You see that? Where we broke those two nodes, and then we have this path where we broke those two nodes. Okay? Those become rails. So we'll just select those two, and we'll choose path and combine. So those two become our rails. Now, if you want to kind of pump yourself up, let's turn those into satin stitches, and you're going to see, wow, that's cool, right? And then you'll just push you to keep going. So let's do it. Let's go to Extensions, InkStitch. Let's choose Params. Now, here's our first little caveat. Wait a minute. That doesn't look at all what I wanted. Those aren't satin stitches. And there's a reason for it. So let's back out. Let's close that out. Let's explain. Let's go to the View menu here and choose Display Mode Normal. Whoa, have we got a mess going here? But let's not focus on the big mess. Let's just focus right here. This shape that we were just working with, right? That does not need a fill. So we cannot have a fill and have satin stitches. So first of all, we got to get rid of the fill by clicking on that button. And then we do need some type of stroke. And so there's our stroke has now been reapplied. Now, when we go to extensions, InkStitch, params, initially, it's going to want to do a running stitch where we have that outline. See that? But we don't want that. So we will turn off running stitches, and then it will automatically say, oh, you want satin. And look at there. Wonderful, beautiful satin, except it's not so wonderful and beautiful, is it? You can see it's got some weirdness to it, but we're going to fix it. So no need to panic. But I just want to show you that that is kind of our first segment. Okay? So how do we fix it? Well, all we have to do is create these things called rungs. So we have to tell InkStitch exactly how we want to handle all the directions of our satin stitches. So we'll grab our pen tool, which is B for pen tool, right? And we'll just click lines. Right click, so we click that line. Let's change our stroke style here to about 0.5. And we don't need it that wide. Okay? And as you get kind of familiar with InkStitch, you'll know kind of how many rungs we have to add and where we have to add them and all of that information. Okay? So I'm just going to come in here and add some where I think we need them. Okay? There we go. If we don't put the rungs in, okay, and this is really actually kind of important to know. If we don't put the rungs in, then InkStitch is going to use the node information. And we did not like plot these nodes specifically. So the reason that we got kind of unexpected results with the satin stitch border is because we have uneven nodes on the outside path and the inside path. And so InkStitch randomly kind of makes these connections of where the nodes were. And if there's an uneven number, it just picks willy-nilly what connections it thinks we want. And so it doesn't generally give us a good representation of the stitch angles. Okay, so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these bits. And for me, the easiest way to do that is just hit your Alt key, and we're just going to literally do this. Anywhere that red line crosses over, those objects are selected. Okay, and then we're going to go choose path and combine. They do all have to be combined. So now when we go to extensions and we choose InkStitch params, now again it's going to default by we want running stitches. So see how it creates running stitches for all of our paths, but we don't want that. So then it'll switch over to create satin columns. And there you go. You see how our satin stitches look really nice. We've defined all of our rungs, all of our directions of how we wanted the stitches dealt with, and it did a really good job. Okay, so there you go. So the first one is complete. So we'll choose apply and quit. Let's go back, because this can be a little bit confusing, but I think what we'll do here is let's do this. Let's just go ahead and come in here and we'll select everything else. Do something like that. Okay, we're not going to do no fill. We are going to apply some kind of a stroke outline, and that will kind of help us as we move along here. Okay, so now let's go back. I don't know. Maybe we don't have to. So let's take a look at something. So remember, in InkStitch, we need rails. So keep that in mind. We need rails. We need like railroad tracks. We need an inside and an outside in order to define our satin. But what do we have here? So we have this piece, and then we have this piece. Okay. Everything is good except this connector right here. We don't have this path, and this path is not connecting. So, imagine if we had a train on this track, it would fall off because we have this gap. Okay, so we need to close that gap. Okay, that's step one. And then also, right here, you can see we have this kind of rounded outside. Now, the rounded outside's okay, but what we need to do is double click on this path right there. We need to break it apart. Okay, so we'll choose right this, break, right? And then we're going to take this and path, and we're going to hit path break apart. So what we got now is we have this piece and this piece, and we have a gap right here. So this, we're just going to double click on this, and we're going to focus on closing the gap. So we just take this piece and we come right down here, right? And now it's not snapping to anything. So we do want to turn snapping on right up here. Click on that icon. You see now it's highlighted in blue, and now it's going to snap to that node. Okay. Now you can see it looks kind of weird, so that's where we come in with our control handles and we fix it. Okay. So there we go. So now it doesn't look so weird, right? But this is still separate from this. Okay. So those two are still separate. So we need those two joined together. So we would just select this bottom shape here and the top shape, and we'll choose Path Combine. Now, strictly speaking, our path is in fact combined. You can see now, if we zoom out here, you can see it really is combined. But that connector here, we know we need to select those two nodes and choose this option, Join Selected Nodes, and now that is truly combined. And you can see that there. Okay, so now that's truly combined. But one last thing we want to do on this railroad track here, we want our satin stitches to go slightly underneath these. So we could just extend that out, and we'll extend this out. And so now our satin stitches, and then this satin will come right over the top. Okay. So you can see again, we have this railroad track and this railroad track, and it was already broken down here. So we're going to do the same thing as we did before. Let's go ahead and add some rungs. We do have snapping turned on, which we may want to turn back off now, because it literally wants to snap to everything. And in our case, we don't want it to snap to everything. Okay, so now we've added some rungs to those two. So we'll switch back to our selection tool, Alt key, and remember, we're just going to swipe through. Everything that we want to have selected needs to cross this red line. Boom. Okay, so now all those are selected. So we'll choose Path and Combine. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to see how we're coming along here. So we'll go back up to Extensions, InkStitch Params. So we're going to convert that section to satin column. And you can see that we do, in fact, get the results we expected. Now remember, I broke that node right at that point. Okay, so now we created that interior and exterior rail, but you can see the results that we get are perfect. Now I do want to point something out. I mean, I don't want to kind of like blow your mind totally, but you notice that this stitches from right to left. And for our particular purpose, we need it to switch from left to right. So we'll just choose the swap rails option, and now you will see it does in fact now switch and stitch from left to right. Okay. We're gonna fine tune the design once we get all of our satin columns created, but I just want to point that out that we are going to have to make a few modifications, okay, as we go here. So basically, you saw what we did for this path. We need to do the exact same thing for the remaining, okay? So we need to connect, first of all, we need to connect these two. So we will just drag this down, and I will go ahead and turn back on our snapping just for a moment here. And we will kind of finesse this curve a little bit, and then I want to click on this one. This node here we can get rid of. So you see that there. And this we can kind of now straighten out. This one's way out in left field there. Let's zoom out a little bit. We probably don't even need that one. This one right here. So we'll delete that, and yeah, that we can make a nice smooth transition there. So that gap is taken care of. Now the path itself is not joined or anything, but we're going to fix that. But let's fix this one down here. See here, we have a similar issue here. So I don't know what's really happening here. So I do want to take a look at that. All right, let's back out a little second here. So first of all, we don't need that one. I'm going to turn off snapping here. That's throwing me off a little bit. And something's happening here. You see that there? And there we go. Now it's looking normal. All right, so now back up here, we will go ahead and extend that. We'll turn back on snapping for a moment. So we're going to snap that over to here and probably go ahead and get rid of that one. And we'll just control these control handles to make a nice satin curve there. Okay, so now we've filled that gap in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and we are going to create a node and break it right there. So we're going to break that right there. And then we're going to do the same thing with this node here. We're going to break that one. Okay. And then we're going to choose to break that path apart. So we're going to choose path, break apart. Okay. And we're going to choose the interior one now and do the same thing. Path, break apart. Okay. And so now you can see that we do in fact have those two pieces. So now we can go ahead and choose that entire outside rail. We know we have to do path and combine. Okay. And then our bottom here, you can see here, oh, that's part of our outside rail. So we'll hit path and combine. So now when I move that outside rail, you can see all the bits are moving. So now we need our inside rail bits. So you can see that is already all one. Okay. Now, where we connected, when we made those little connections, we did not choose that join path at nodes purposely. Okay. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and create my rungs and see if it creates the satin stitch even though we did not do the join at selected nodes. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our rungs here. So we'll just come in here and we'll add a rung there, there. Let me get rid of that snapping. It's gonna make me mad. We'll add a node or a rung there, there, there. We'll add one right there. And we can also double click when you, it's probably easier just to double click. Sometimes I double click, sometimes I right click. So now we have our rungs. And remember what we have to do next. We have to switch over and select all those pieces. So we just need to come through here, just like so. Okay, that's all those pieces that make up that satin border. And we have to go to Path and Combine. Okay, and now we'll go to Extensions. We'll choose InkStitch and we'll choose Params. And we'll see if we have to do that join at selected node situation. So we're not going to do running stitches. We're going to just do satin columns. Well, we answered that question pretty quickly, didn't we? So yes. So the answer is yes. We do need to join at selected nodes because we get this very unexpected result. So not a big concern, but I assumed that was going to create a problem. So anyhow, we're just going to double click on all of that, and you can see right here, I believe that's where we join those nodes right there. So that takes care of that. And then up here, these node icons do kind of give us a guide of where the potential problem is. So there we go. We took care of that. And then this satin, remember we want it to be slightly covered. So we will move that in. Okay, so this is where it starts. And then it slightly goes in, and then it's going to have a running stitch that's going to come up here and start here and come back down, come all the way back around. So we need our tracks to extend slightly here too. So now our tracks go slightly, and then again it's going to come up here and then come back around and down and finish off. So now let's see if this does in fact is fixed now. So we go to Extensions, InkStitch Params. We're not going to do running stitches. We do need to do satin. Took care of the bottom. And took care of the top. Okay? And it is stitching from left to right. So it's starting here and coming up and around like we want it to. So that's all good. So we'll hit Apply and Quit. Excellent. Okay? So now what I want to do is I want to just look at my satin border here, and I want to see how all that stitches out. So we're going to come up here to Extensions, InkStitch. Let's come down to Visualize and Export, and let's come to Simulator mode. And just take a look at how this is going to stitch. So you see our little overlaps happening, right? And notice that that first section starts stitching from the bottom and not from the top. So we can't have that. So we'll select that first section and we'll choose Extensions, InkStitch Params. And the only thing that we need to change here is we need to swap those rails. Okay, so we'll swap the rails. You'll see it starts from the top, so we'll just choose Apply and Cut. Or Apply and Quit, I'm sorry. And now let's take a look at that again. So InkStitch, Extensions, InkStitch, Simulator, and let's take a look at that one more time. So yes, that satin border is stitching just as we expect, but there is a problem here. And when we turn on our jump stitches, you'll see we have this unexpected jump stitch, okay? And that's because it's jumping from right here to over here and then stitching. And that's obviously not what we want. So let's go ahead and close that out for a moment. So there is a function in InkStitch, and sometimes it works. I will say this, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So let's just go ahead and select our design and see if in fact in this particular instance it will. So let's go to Extensions, InkStitch. There's an option down here that says Tool Satin, and it says Auto Route Satin Columns. And so what that helps us with is those jump stitches. So if I choose that option, you can see here we can choose to trim jump stitches, preserve the order of the satin columns. We do want that. let's just click on live preview to see what it would do, what it would give us if we were to go ahead and do that. So yes, so in this particular situation, it did kind of do what we expected, but no, it didn't. Okay, so you see all these lines here? You see this line here? And this line here coming around? And this line here? That's what that auto route satin columns added. Okay, and we do need this. We do need this line, and we do need this line. But all of this other monkey business, we don't need. So why it's there, I don't really know. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that because that is not what we want. Okay, so that's why I've honestly, I've never seen a situation where that works the way I would expect it to. It's a little bit strange. But at any rate, that's fine. We'll fix it. So we have our paths here. So all we need to do to create what we need is hit the pen tool. And all we need to do is just click a few times. You can see here, I'm just clicking, 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 and clicking. That's all I'm doing, creating that path. And then we're going to come over to our stroke style. Any dashed line will get the job done. That's all we needed to do. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to start this path. And we're just clicking roughly in the center. And we're going to come up here. And it's already a dashed line. Now, there is one little caveat. We need this in the proper stitch order. So we know that this path is path 21 is the first one that stitches. So that little running stitch we need between those two. And then this is path 31. So this running stitch needs to be right above that piece. Okay. And so now this is going to stitch in the proper order. I feel like this might help us. Let's do satin border 01. So that is our first piece of our satin border that's going to stitch. And then this is 02. And then this is 03. And then this will be, we'll just call it connector 01 and connector 02. And now let's see how our satin border will in fact run. So we'll come up here to extensions, InkStitch, simulator. So you see what's happening there. Let's pause this. So our first piece of our satin border stitches covers up our patch applique. And then we have a running stitch from right there over to the top of the next satin. And it stitches. And then we have a running stitch to the top of the next satin there. You see that? And then, of course, it finishes out just like that. And if we click on our info button here, you will see that we have no jumps, we have no trims, and we have the exact result that we're looking for. So now we can close this out. And now we know all that is working correctly. Okay. So we have, let's go ahead and turn this back on. We'll turn on our patch applique layer. So for our patch tack down, we cannot have a fill. So we are going to have no fill, but we do want some type of stroke. And then for our fabric outline shape, we don't want any fill, but we do want some type of color. And so now let's go ahead and take a look at this. So now we can go ahead and go into InkStitch, visualize and export, and let's choose simulator here. And we're going to see exactly what we get. So the first thing that this file is going to do is going to stitch the outline fabric shape that we can then cut out manually. And then when we go to make the patch, we need to run this. That's going to be our placement stitch. That's going to show us where to put our fabric down. And then it's going to tack down our fabric with that tack down stitch. Okay. And then it's going to come over the top with our satin border covering up the edge of our patch fabric. Now, on this, the green stroke, we might want to take a look at doing something different with that particular path. Okay, so let me show you what we can do for a little bit extra credit here. So let's click on that particular piece, which is our tack down, and let's go into InkStitch extensions, and let's take a look at params and see what some of the other options might be for that. So instead of this running stitch, we can choose something else. So you can see here we have what we call a ripple stitch. Okay. We have a zigzag stitch. And that might be something that we want to take a look at. So we might want to use a zigzag instead of just a simple running stitch. Okay. So there's several things that we can change here. We can change the zigzag spacing. Okay. But notice that we cannot change the width of our zigzag. Okay. But you see here, we have this other option. It says tack stitch, lock stitch, right? So I don't know what all these various options are, but you could choose different options. If we go back to, let's go back to running stitch here. Just choose a simple running stitch. And then we could do and you see when we choose those options, it's choosing a bow tie, a cross, and that is just the initial tack stitch. Okay. So yeah. But so anyhow, we may want to use this zigzag to, you see that zigzag stitch? So we may want to use the zigzag, okay? But we may want it to be wider than it is. And we also might want to change the spacing. So the zigzag spacing, for example, we could change it to like 3 millimeters. Okay, that might be extreme. Let's do 1. Okay, and so you'll get this kind of result here. And use that to tack down the end of our fabric. But if we want this to be wider, let's go ahead and choose apply and quit. If we want this to be wider, so it does so it does cover kind of like the outside of our fabric, then what we would have to do is we would have to make this stroke wider. Okay, so we have this tack down here. Let's go back to our stroke and let's increase our stroke to, like, I don't know, let's do 1.5 maybe. So you see how now that is wider, right? And maybe let's try 2.5. So you can see it almost goes right to the edge of, let's do 3. So you can see now it's kind of getting wide and it just barely covers our fabric, at least on this side of it. So now let's go back into InkStitch, params, and we'll take a look at it again. And now you can see how much wider that is. And of course, you can see the spacing that we applied to it. We did a 1 millimeter peak to peak. And so we may like this better as a tack down than what we had previously. Okay. And one other thing that we might want to do, I don't think we have to do it in this case because it's only like, well, what's that, 3 millimeters? But we could specify a minimum stitch length and we could have an extra needle penetration. So you see the needle penetrations are just at the top and the bottom. But if we change the maximum stitch length to 1.5, what that gives us is it should give us a needle point in between. So we had 3. I don't see that it does though. What's that? Oh, that's minimum stitch length. That's not what we want. That's jump stitch length. Okay. Where is... So minimum stitch length. What if we do 1.5 there? Nope. I guess it doesn't give us that option. That's strange. Because it should give us the option to, but I don't guess it is. Nope. To have a secondary, probably because our spacing is only 3 millimeters, so we don't really need another needle point in between. That's probably what it's basically saying. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and accept this because I do like that. So we'll go ahead and choose apply and quit here. But there is one other param I do want to set, and that is for the outline shape. So we'll come in here to InkStitch and choose params. And all we're going to do is add a stop. So we're going to add a stop after. So after it stitches this, we want the machine to stop and allow us to place our fabric before we move on. So we're going to go ahead and choose apply and quit. And there we go. That is our embroidery file in a nutshell. Now, do look in the listing description below, and we will have a video where we actually stitch this out and kind of walk through this whole thing so you have a better understanding of exactly how all this works. I will go ahead and cut out our shape using our fancy laser, and I'll show you that too. So that'll be kind of fun just for you to see that process if you did have a laser. And you know, lasers are so cheap now, and there's so many things you can do with a laser that if you do any type of applique work at all, you may want to take a look at getting a laser because it really does make it a lot easier. Okay, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Do check out that video on actually creating the patch that we're going to use for this. So let's hit File, Save As, or I guess we could just hit File, Save. Firstly, we're going to save it as an InkScape file. So we're going to call it Cloud Patch. Okay, and just as a regular InkScape file. And then I'm going to save this for my machine. File, Save As. And we are going to choose my Brother PES format. Okay, hit save. And then we need to turn off our new satin border. So it's creating that PES file. So we're going to turn off our new satin border layer. We are going to then turn off the tack down. So this is the shape that we need for the laser. So now we'll hit File, we'll hit Save As, and now we're back over to Inkscape SVG, and we need to save that as Cloud Border. And we're going to pull that into Lightburn and then burn that shape with our laser rather than having to manually cut it I'll probably show you both processes, but we don't want to have to manually cut this shape out. Not when we have our laser to cut it for us. Okay? So, with that said, that's it for this one. Check out the sewing video in the listing description where we sew this out. Thanks for watching.